They say America is young, barely a few centuries old, but what if that was only the surface? What if beneath the Rockies, beneath the red deserts and cold mountain shadows, an older heartbeat still echoes, waiting for someone, anyone, to rediscover it? Tonight, you and I are going somewhere few dare to imagine. Into a sleeping empire. Into the forgotten civilization America quietly turned its back on. Not erased, simply buried. Buried so deep that even time gave up searching. But stories don't stay asleep forever. They move. They whisper. They push through the cracks. And the one you're about to hear might change the way you look at every map, every monument, every mile of this country. Before we begin this journey beneath the Rockies, before we descend into myths that once walked like men, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what wakes up next. The Rockies were always too quiet at night. Even when the winds slid through the pines like wandering spirits, even when the snow cracked under its own weight, even when the valley echoes answered each other like voices learning how to speak again, something about the silence didn't feel natural. It felt arranged. Like someone, long before America ever existed, had designed the mountains for listening instead of living. And I didn't understand any of it until the night I followed the old surveyor's map, the one the town insisted didn't exist, the one that smelled like dust and wildfire and secrets. The kind passed hand to hand, never spoken aloud, always folded quickly, as if the air itself might steal it. It was nearly midnight when I reached the ridge, breath fogging like sleep itself was trying to escape my body. My flashlight flickered, the batteries dying in a place where electronics always behaved like stubborn animals. They didn't want to work here. Nothing modern did. It was as if the ground rejected anything born after a certain century. I stood on a patch of flattened stone, windless and cold, a place where no tree grew and no snow stayed. Ancient people believed flat stones like these were thresholds, doors, or warnings. But I had come looking for a story the town refused to tell. Something older than the settlers. Older than the tribes. Older than anything the textbooks dared to whisper. They called it the Sleeping Empire, though no one would explain why. Every time I asked, the answers drifted into jokes or silence, or the kind of nervous laugh that hides fear. Something happened here. Something big enough to bury in the very heart of the country. My boots scratched over the stone, dust lifting like breath from a long-buried creature. Beneath the thin layer of dirt was carving, deliberate, deep, and spiraling inward like a slow-motion whirlpool. It wasn't English. It wasn't Spanish. It wasn't any indigenous script I recognized. It looked older, far older, almost too perfect to have been carved by human hands. Each line carried a strange symmetry, as if the rock had grown the markings naturally. As if the earth had wanted to remember something. My fingertips hovered above them, and for a moment, the cold pulsed against my skin like the last heartbeat of a sleeping animal. I snatched my hand back. The wind returned suddenly, as if exhaling after holding its breath too long. And with it came sound. Not a voice. Not an echo. Something lower. A vibration. A rumble that wasn't thunder but felt like it belonged beneath the world. It came and went, soft and slow, like breathing. I knelt, pressing my ear to the stone. At first I heard nothing except the playful hiss of wind. But then, slow, rhythmic, impossibly deep, the sound reached me again. The pulse. Like a drum beating under miles of rock. Like the mountains had a sleeping heart. A shiver crawled up my spine. I didn't know whether to run or listen. Curiosity won, the dangerous kind that ruins both historians and wanderers. I brushed more dust aside. The spiral markings continued, more complex the deeper they went toward the center. But something unexpected appeared between two of the curves, small indentations arranged in purposeful patterns. My headlamp caught them, and for a moment I froze. They weren't carvings. They were fingerprints. Not human ones. Whiter. Longer. Pressed into the rock as if the stone had been soft clay. As if something strong enough to reshape mountains had touched this place. I tried to steady my breathing, but the night around me seemed to tighten, growing heavy like a blanket pulling itself over the land. The stars blurred, or maybe my eyes did. My legs didn't want to move. My mind whispered that I should leave, that the mountain didn't want me here. But the pulse under the stone felt familiar, comforting almost, like a story waiting to be woken. People in town always said the Rockies had a way of choosing who heard their secrets. I used to laugh at that. Now I wasn't so sure. A sudden gust swept. The ridge, cold enough to sting. Snowflakes swirled but didn't land on the slab. They drifted around it, avoiding it entirely. That was the moment I realized the flat stone wasn't a natural formation. It was a lid. A giant, ancient lid covering something below. And the pulsing wasn't coming from the mountains. It was coming from whatever lay under this slab. I stood so quickly I nearly slipped. The flashlight sputtered again. My heart raced, not out of fear, but instinct. Something was waking up. Or maybe it had felt me long before I felt it. I stepped back, crunching over the edge of the clearing. A whisper of warm air slipped up from the stone center, brushing my face. In freezing mountain night air. No natural cave breathes like that. No geothermal vent exhales in rhythm. No mountain warms the skin only at its core. I held my breath. And then, without warning, the spiral markings glowed faintly, not bright, not enough to light the stone. Just a soft, pulse-like shimmer responding directly to the warmth rising from beneath. I staggered backward, tripping on a buried root. My elbow smacked the ground hard, pain shooting up my arm. But I couldn't look away. The glow intensified, still dim but unmistakable. The lines were waking up. Or remembering. My heart thumped in sync with the deep pulse rising from below. For a moment, just a heartbeat, I felt the mountain breathing with me. And then the glow stopped. The wind stopped. The warmth vanished. Everything became still. Deathly still. Silence expanded so quickly it clicked in my ears. The mountain felt suddenly empty, like whatever had been stirring had rolled over and gone back to sleep. I crawled backward, breath shaking. Should I leave? Should I run? Or should I wait? That last thought frightened me more than anything else. I wasn't someone who waited for danger to approach. But something here pulled at me. Not physically. Emotionally. Like déjà vu wrapped in nostalgia. Like I was remembering a place I had never been. My fingers brushed against my backpack. I pulled out my notebook, the one I reserved for strange finds. The page fluttered in the windless air as I started sketching the spiral pattern from memory. But halfway through the sketch, something strange happened. My hand stopped moving. My pencil hovered above the page, refusing to complete the final loop. That last curve. I felt a pressure behind my eyes every time I tried to draw it. A warning. A whisper telling me, not this one. Not yet. I dropped the pencil. My hands trembled. A distant howl rose from the dark treeline far below, long and low and broken. Not a wolf. Not any animal I recognized. The sound was too hollow, too ancient. My chest tightened. I hadn't realized until then how far I had walked from the nearest town. No phone signal. No radio. No help. Just me, and whatever was buried here. I crouched beside the slab again, not too close, and studied the stone's edges. They weren't chiseled. They were fused. Melted. As if the rock had been exposed to extreme heat long ago, the kind that could soften mountains. Stories from the region's oldest tribes mention skyfire and sleeping giants. Scholars dismissed them as metaphors. Maybe they shouldn't have. I placed my palm lightly on the stone, not touching the center, just the outer edge. Nothing happened. No pulse. No warmth. No whisper. But deep inside the rock, beneath layers of time, I felt something subtle. Like the leftover warmth in a bed someone recently left. Traces of life. Traces of presence. Traces of something waiting. A shooting star streaked overhead, bright enough to cast shadows for an instant. When the light faded, the shadows lingered half a second too long, as if something on the ridge hadn't moved in perfect sync with the world. That was enough. I backed away, heart thudding like a drum. I needed to leave before curiosity dragged me deeper. The forest line waited with open darkness, the kind that feels wider than it should. I took one last look at the slab. The wind returned. Soft and steady, almost soothing. The mountains looked normal again. Ordinary. Sleeping. But I knew better now. Something beneath the Rockies wasn't resting. It was listening. Waiting. And somehow, some impossible way, it had heard me. I tightened my backpack straps and started down the slope, crunching through frost, refusing to look back. But halfway down the ridge, a sound slipped through the night that made every muscle in my body lock. A voice. Not human. Not fully awake. Just 3 simple words rising through stone and soil like the earth was learning to speak again. Not yet human. My breath froze. My feet refused to move. And above me, on the ridge, the slab exhaled a final warm sigh, like a giant turning in its sleep. The sleeping empire beneath the Rockies was real. And it had just noticed me. The descent from the ridge should have taken half an hour, maybe less, but every step felt stretched, like the mountain was slowing time just enough to keep me inside its boundaries. The trees below swayed gently, though there was no wind. Snowflakes drifted sideways and then froze midair for the briefest second, catching the moonlight like suspended crystals before falling again. The world felt uncertain, as if reality itself paused to understand what had just woken beneath the stone. My boots sank into the soft earth near the treeline, the soil looser than I remembered. The smell was different too, like turned dirt, old rain, and something metallic, faint but distinct. A scent of awakening. I tried to shake the feeling off. The town sat only a few miles down the winding trail, lights tucked behind hills like sleepy fireflies. Civilization. Warmth. People. Noise. Anything but the ancient silence that hung over the mountains like a forgotten breath. I hoped that once I left the ridge behind, whatever I had felt, heard, would fade into the night like a half-remembered dream. But the words still echoed inside my skull, not yet human. They didn't feel spoken. They felt transmitted, like a memory someone slipped into my mind. My fingers tingled. I flexed them repeatedly, trying to shake the sensation. The forest accepted me slowly. Branches shifted aside as if recognizing an unwelcome guest. The path looked familiar but off by inches, like it had been redrawn moments before I arrived. The moon weaved through the canopy, light flickering in a strange rhythm. My heartbeat followed it, sinking without permission. I walked faster. Snow cracked under my boots. The air grew thick, warm pockets sliding between cold ones. As I reached a bend in the trail, something crunched behind me, heavy, deliberate, too slow to be an animal running. I spun around, breath sharp, but the forest was empty. Trees stood motionless, branches frozen like they were listening. Only my footprints broke the untouched snow. I wasn't alone, but nothing was visible. I tightened my grip on the backpack straps and forced myself to move. The trail dipped lower, winding past an outcropping of limestone that locals called the Old Man's Brow, because of how the stone jutted out like a furrowed forehead. But tonight the formation looked different. Softer edges. Deeper shadows. The rock seemed to be shifting, Or maybe the darkness was crawling across its surface. I stared too long. A low hum, barely audible, vibrated through the ground. Like the pulse from the ridge, but weaker. Fainter. A whisper from something half asleep. My throat tightened. The hum seeped into my bones, turning fear into something strangely familiar. Recognition. Like I'd heard it somewhere before. A childhood dream? A story told once and forgotten? Impossible. Yet the feeling refused to leave. The air around the limestone grew warmer, my breath no longer forming clouds. Instinct made me step back. The hum stopped. The cold returned instantly. The forest exhaled in relief. And just like that, the rock looked normal again. Lifeless, rigid, ancient in the ordinary way. "Don't stop," I whispered to myself. My voice sounded too loud, like it didn't belong here. I pushed down the trail, moving quickly, nearly jogging when the terrain allowed. The silence shifted behind me in slow waves, like something massive was following but choosing not to show itself. Snow slid from a branch. A rabbit darted into the underbrush. Normal sounds, ordinary noises. But now every rustle felt significant. Every shadow seemed shaped with intention. My hands were freezing. I shoved them into my jacket pockets, fingers brushing the old sketchbook. The page with the spiral carving was still open, the half-drawn curve unfinished. The pencil stroke ended abruptly, as if the page itself refused completion. A faint warmth radiated from the paper. I yanked my hand out. That wasn't possible. The sketchbook couldn't be warm. It had been in my pack, against cold fabric, in freezing air. But when I reached in again, hesitant, and touched the paper once more, it was warm. Almost like the slab's breath from earlier. A pulse throbbed beneath my fingertips. I snapped the book shut so fast the sound startled a bird from a nearby branch. It fluttered upward, wings beating a panicked rhythm. The forest didn't like that. The branches shivered. A groaning sound echoed through the trunks, deep, wooden, unnatural. Like the trees were stretching after a very long sleep. My skin prickled. I walked faster. The path leveled out, hugging the side of a steep ravine. The moonlight brightened, silvering the snow. Down below, the creek's frozen surface glowed faintly, a color that didn't belong to nature. Pale turquoise, pulsing softly, in the same rhythm I'd heard beneath the stone. My heart nearly stopped. Water doesn't glow. Ice doesn't pulse. Yet there it was, faint but undeniable, the color beating like a slow heartbeat trapped under the frozen creek bed. Something beneath the Rockies was moving again. And the movement wasn't isolated. It was spreading. I crouched near the edge of the ravine, gripping a pine root for balance. The creek lay 30 feet below, frozen surface shimmering with the strange light. I listened. At first, only silence. The faintest vibration traveling through the air, up the slope, into my fingertips gripping the root. The same frequency I had felt under the stone slab. Not identical, but related. Connected. Like multiple voices humming the same ancient chord. My breath grew shallow. The sleeping empire, whatever it was, wasn't just under the ridge. It was under everything. The entire mountain range pulsed with hidden life, as if an ancient organism lay dormant beneath the crust, dreaming in slow centuries. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone even though I knew there would be no signal. The battery was at 80% when I started the hike. Now it read 12. The screen glitched, pixels bending into swirling patterns weirdly similar to the markings on the slab. I shoved the phone away. Technology wasn't meant for this place. It never had been. A crack echoed from across the ravine, sharp, clear, and deliberate. Not a falling branch. Not shifting ice. Footstep. Heavy. Slow. Too spaced out to be human, too rhythmic to be an animal. The sound repeated. A second step. Snow compressed in a deep, groaning crunch. My pulse matched the glowing ice. I ducked lower, breath catching. The forest on the opposite side of the ravine was too dark to see clearly. Only the faint outlines of trunks stood silhouetted against the moonlight. The footsteps continued, each one measured. Each one so heavy I felt the ground tremble. And then the forest shifted. Not a movement. A shape. A distortion. Something massive moved between the trees, but too smooth, too fluid, like a shadow passing behind a curtain of darkness. My throat tightened. There were no animals that size in these mountains. Not anymore. The shadow paused. The glowing ice brightened. A soft, warm breath drifted across the ravine. Impossible, unnatural, reaching me like a hand extended patiently. It smelled like earth after rain. Like warm stone. Like age itself. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. It spoke. Not in words. Not like the whisper from the ridge. This was a low tremor rippling through the world itself. A greeting. A recognition. A warning. Or maybe all three. My knee buckled. I stumbled back from the ravine edge. The shadow shifted again, slightly taller now, slightly more defined. Shoulders. A head. Something hunched but towering, like a giant trying to stand after eons of sleep. My instincts screamed to run. My body refused. Instead, I felt myself step forward, drawn by some ancient thread woven into the ground beneath me. The creature didn't advance. It simply watched, listened, sensed me. And then, as if satisfied, it retreated. Slowly. Silently. The forest swallowed it whole once more. The glowing ice dimmed. The pulse faded. The mountain exhaled. And I finally found enough strength to move. I ran. Down the trail. Through the trees. Past the familiar boulders and frosted ferns. My lungs burned. My legs shook. But I didn't stop until the first faint glow of the town's streetlights appeared through the thinning trees. Civilization. Noise. Humans. I expected relief. Instead, a heavy sense of disappointment pressed against my chest. I wasn't leaving something behind. It was letting me go. The trail spat me out onto the small gravel maintenance road behind the town's water tower. My breath came in ragged pulls, but the normalcy of the surroundings felt wrong. The world seemed duller, as if the colors had lost their depth. Or maybe my eyes had awakened to something the rest of the world forgot. I made my way toward home, passing dark storefronts with frost-clouded windows. The bakery, the barber shop, the antique store with clocks that never told the right time. Familiar places that suddenly felt too small, too shallow, too awake in the wrong way. By the time I reached my porch, dawn was creeping over the horizon, painting the sky in pale orange and violet. The mountains loomed behind my house, silent and cold. Perfectly normal. Perfectly asleep. I unlocked the door with trembling hands. But before stepping inside, I glanced back. Far up the ridge, where the slab lay hidden, a single point of light glimmered in the fading night. Faint. Like the heartbeat of something waiting patiently beneath the Rockies. Not gone. Not forgotten. Not human. Not yet. I didn't sleep when I finally walked inside. I didn't even try. My house felt too small, too fragile, too modern, like a thin shell built over something ancient, something that could crack through at any moment. I locked the door, then locked it again, though part of me knew that if whatever I saw in the forest wanted to enter, a lock would mean nothing. Still, it made me feel half safe. Human habits cling hardest when the world stops making sense. I dropped my backpack on the couch and went straight to the kitchen sink, splashing cold water on my face. My reflection in the window was pale, eyes wide, pupils too large. I looked like someone who'd seen something they knew they shouldn't have seen. The mountain's heartbeat still echoed faintly in my ears. My fingers still tingled as if holding invisible static. And somewhere deep in my chest, an unsettling emotion had taken root. Not fear, not awe, recognition. Like I had brushed against a story I once belonged to but forgot. The sun climbed slowly over the rooftops outside. Its light spilled across the wooden floorboards but felt weak, almost artificial compared to the glow in the frozen creek. I made coffee and stared at it instead of drinking, the surface rippling with tiny vibrations even though the mug sat still. My hands shook. I placed the coffee down carefully and opened the backpack. The sketchbook slid out on its own, like it wanted to be acknowledged. "This is insane," I muttered, though my voice carried no conviction. I opened the book. The spiral was still warm. Warmer than it should have been. The half-drawn curve seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at it. And for a strange moment, I felt like if I completed the drawing, something would complete itself inside the mountain. Or inside me. I closed the book quickly. Not yet. I needed answers before I made any choice that felt irreversible. I grabbed my coat and stepped outside again. The morning felt too quiet. Not peaceful, like the world was taking shallow breaths. The town was waking up slowly. A few cars rolled onto the main street, crusted with frost. Someone walked their dog, bundled in layers. Normal life pressed forward as if the mountain wasn't pulsing with a hidden heartbeat. I headed toward the library, not because I expected to find anything useful there, but because it was the oldest building in town. And old things sometimes remember. The librarian, Mrs. Lowell, looked up from her desk as I entered. She was in her 70s, sharp-eyed beneath round glasses, the kind of person who knew every secret the town tried to hide. "You're out early," she said, narrowing her gaze. "Mountain trouble?" My throat tightened. How did she always know? "Just research," I replied, though even I didn't believe the words. Her eyes lingered a moment longer before returning to her computer. "Third shelf on the left if you're looking for local history." I walked past rows of quiet shelves, the air thick with the smell of books and dust, a comforting contrast to the forest's unsettling scents. The local history section was small. A few books on mining, settler diaries, indigenous folklore collections, poorly curated and incomplete. But one book stood out. It had no title on the spine, just a worn leather cover, edges fraying. I pulled it out. The book felt heavier than it looked. Older too, not just in age but in presence. Like it belonged to the mountain. I took a seat in the far corner and opened it. The first pages were blank. Yellowed. Stained. But then the text started, handwritten, looping ink strokes fading in some parts. It wasn't in English. It wasn't in any language I immediately recognized. But the shapes of the letters made something inside me twitch. They echoed the spiral pattern, not in form, but in intention. The writing curved and swirled as though meant to be read in motion rather than line by line. My head throbbed when I tried to follow the script. I flipped ahead. Sketches filled the middle pages. Mountains, caverns, colossal figures half buried in rock. One drawing froze my breath. A stone slab carved with spiraling lines, almost identical to the one I'd found on the ridge. Beneath it, the shape. Not a person. Not an animal. Something huge curled beneath the rock like a sleeping titan. A handwritten note beneath the sketch, translated in smaller text. The first sleepers of the West. My pulse pounded. I turned the page. Another sketch showed a massive humanoid silhouette, proportions slightly off, arms too long, head too large, spine curved unnaturally. But the most disturbing part wasn't the creature itself. It was the people drawn beside it. Humans. Worshipping. Or listening. Another note read, "Not our gods. Not our kings. Our ancestors from before memory." My stomach tightened. A chill crawled across my skin. I flipped further. Pages described the deep breathers, creatures said to sleep beneath mountains, beneath deserts, beneath oceans. Not myth. Not metaphor. A forgotten species older than any civilization. According to the text, they communicated not with voices but with resonance, vibrations through earth and stone. My fingers went numb. That's what I'd heard. That pulse. That hum. That voice. Not yet human. The phrase stabbed through my mind again, as if echoing from the night before. Did the creature recognize me? Or mistake me for something else? The final section of the book was the most unsettling. It described a time when the sleepers stirred, briefly, centuries ago. Mountain tremors. Strange lights. Warm winds in winter. People hearing whispers in the ground. And those who heard the whispers changed. Not visibly. Not immediately. But they began dreaming in patterns, spirals, caverns, glowing rivers. And eventually, they felt compelled to return to the mountains. Some never came back. I slammed the book shut, breath uneven. My chair scraped loudly across the wooden floor. Mrs. Lowell looked over, concern etched into her brow. "Find what you were looking for?" she asked. I forced a nod. "Can I borrow this?" She tilted her head slightly. "Funny thing, you're the first person who's ever seen that book." My heart skipped. "What do you mean?" "It wasn't on the shelf yesterday." I swallowed hard. "And the language in it, do you know what it is?" She shook her head. "Can't read a word of it. Never could. But some folks say it's older than the town itself. Older than the tribes too." I hesitated. "Do you believe in the stories? The ones about what sleeps beneath the Rockies?" Her expression didn't change, but something in her eyes did. A flicker of old fear. Or old memory. "Belief doesn't matter," she said quietly. "Listening does." Her words hit me like a stone. Listening. Like the mountains did. Like the creature did. Like the slab did. I tucked the book under my arm and left quickly, the cold outside slapping me with clarity. My fingers tingled again. The sunlight felt too bright. My house felt even smaller when I returned, the walls suddenly more confining. I set the book on the kitchen table. The sketchbook sat nearby, still warm. The two books seemed aware of each other. My breath trembled. I needed to know more. But before I could open either book again, a sound drifted through the air, soft, distant, unmistakable. A low, slow hum. Not from the mountains. From beneath the ground. Beneath my house. The floorboards vibrated gently, like something far below was stirring. I froze. The hum deepened, not threatening but calling. Recognizing. Responding. I stepped back from the table. The sketchbook flipped open by itself, pages fluttering until they landed on the half-drawn spiral. The curve I could not finish. And right before my eyes, the pencil mark extended itself by a single inch. Not drawn. Grown. My knees weakened. The hum rose. The tumblers in my front door clicked. Someone, or something hit. Slow. Heavy. As if a sleeping fist made of stone had tapped the wood. The hum stopped. The silence. Screamed. I approached the door carefully, every inch of my body telling me not to open it. But another part of me, deeper, older, insisted I must. My hand hovered over the knob. My heartbeat matched the warm pulse of the mountains. And from the other side of the door, a voice whispered through the wood, quieter than breath. "You heard us." I swallowed. My hand twisted the knob. I opened the door. And everything I thought I understood about the world collapsed in an instant. The cold morning air rushed in as I opened the door, but it wasn't the cold that made my breath vanish. It was the emptiness. No figure stood on the porch. No shadow waited. No footprints marked the thin layer of frost that coated the wooden boards. Just stillness, stretched thin and trembling like a held breath. The knock had been real, heavy, undeniable, but whoever knocked hadn't stayed to be seen. Or, they had never needed to be seen in the first place. I stepped out cautiously, scanning the yard. The sun was still low, casting long, pale shadows that felt too sharp for the hour. The mountains loomed behind the town, silent and unassuming, as if nothing had stirred beneath them only hours before. But I knew better. The hum beneath my floorboard had not been a dream. The pulse echoing through the ground now felt even stronger, like a heartbeat I couldn't unhear. A soft gust brushed past my ear, warmer than the morning air. A whisper rode it, faint and nearly swallowed by the breeze. Closer. I turned sharply. Nothing. Just the old pine at the fence line swaying gently. But the voice hadn't come from the forest. It had come from below. I backed into the house and shut the door slowly. The moment the latch clicked, the sketchbook on the kitchen table fluttered again, pages flipping until it opened to the spiral. The last inch of the unfinished line still shimmered faintly, as if alive. No, I muttered. Not right now. The book ignored me, a soft warmth radiating from its center. I stepped away from it and toward the leather-bound book I brought from the library. Maybe the knock hadn't been a warning. Maybe it had been an invitation. The test. Or a reminder that the sleepers were aware of me now. Aware in a way they hadn't been aware of humans for a long time. I opened the old book to the final pages again. Beneath another sketch of a massive cavern filled with glowing symbols, a line of translated text read, "When the sleeper wakes, the listener cannot hide." My pulse thudded. Listener. The words circled my mind like a moth around a flame. The book seemed to insist that certain people, rare, unfortunate, chosen, cursed, whatever term fit, were able to hear the resonance of the beings beneath the earth. Chosen not because of blood, or skill, or knowledge, but because the mountain itself decided. As though the sleepers brushed against certain minds in the same way a breeze brushes tall grass. Had it chosen me? That felt wrong. It didn't choose me. It recognized me. The thought chilled me more than the icy morning ever could. I placed the book down and reached for my jacket. I couldn't stay inside waiting for another knock or another voice traveling up through my floorboards. I needed answers. Real answers. The library book had opened a door. Now I had to walk through it. I left the house and headed toward the outskirts of town where the oldest buildings stood, places relics of past generations still lingered. The old schoolhouse, the abandoned mill, and the historical society, a squat building with peeling paint that housed relics nobody cared about anymore. The sign on the door read closed, but I knew the lock was broken. It had been for years. I pushed inside. The interior smelled like dust, pine, and time. Crates were scattered across the wooden floor. Rusted farm tools leaned against walls. Old mining equipment gathered cobwebs in the corner. But what I wanted, what I needed, was in the back room. A narrow hallway branched left and right. I headed left. The door at the end was ajar, a thin bar of darkness slicing across the floorboards. I pushed inside. The back room was cluttered with relics, maps, old survey logs, arrowheads, pottery fragments, yellowed photos, but one wall held what I sought, a massive, hand-drawn map of the Rockies. Its edges were brittle, corners curled, ink faded in places. But the markings, strange symbols, spirals, and crisscrossed paths, were still visible. And one symbol in particular froze my breath. A spiral matching the one on the slab, drawn exactly where I had been the night before. Beside it, an old note pinned to the map read, "Do not disturb the stone. Do not mark the stone. Do not wake what remembers." My throat tightened. Someone had known. Someone before me. Perhaps long before any living resident of the town. I stepped closer, fingertips brushing the edges of the map. More spirals dotted the region, some in remote valleys, others near cliffs, one even near the frozen creek where the ice had glowed. This wasn't a single anomaly. It was part of a network, a system, or a slumbering organism spread through the bones of the mountains. The more I studied, the more my pulse aligned with some invisible rhythm emanating from the inked markings. Something deep inside the earth seemed to stir in response to my attention, as if acknowledging my recognition. The floor trembled lightly beneath my boots. Just once. A nudge. Almost affectionate. I stepped back quickly. "Don't do that," I whispered, though I wasn't speaking to anyone in the room. A sudden creak echoed behind me. I spun. Mrs. Lowell stood in the doorway, her expression unreadable behind her round glasses. "Figured I might find you here," she said quietly. "How did you?" "Because," she cut in, "every listener ends up here. Eventually." My stomach dropped. "You know what's happening." "I know enough." She stepped into the room, her eyes drifting to the map. Long before this town existed, long before any settlers arrived, the tribes spoke of ancient ones sleeping beneath the mountains. They said the earth carried memory the way humans carry blood. So the stories were real. Real enough. She touched one of the spirals gently. "And now they're stirring." I hesitated. "Why now?" "Because something woke them." She looked at me. "Or someone." Her gaze held no accusation, only understanding. And that frightened me more than blame would have. "I didn't do anything," I said weakly. "You listened." She stepped closer. "And they heard you." My breath shook. "What do they want?" Her silence told me she didn't know. Or worse, she did know, but wished she didn't. "Come," she said softly. "There's something you need to see." She led me to a locked drawer at the far end of the room. From her pocket she pulled a thin key, old, rusted, the kind that belonged in a museum. The lock clicked open. Inside lay a stack of papers bound by cloth. She slid them out reverently. "These," she whispered, "are the journals of the first surveyor who mapped this region. He didn't finish his work. Disappeared in the winter of 1894. These are all he left behind." She placed the bundle in my hands. They were heavier than I expected. Like the mountain's weight was inside them. I untied the cloth. The first page was a rough sketch of the same slab I had found. Beneath it, a scribbled note. "They breathe beneath the stone. They wait. They remember. And they know when one of us hears them." I swallowed. "Did he hear them too?" Mrs. Lowell nodded slowly. "Every listener hears them." I flipped to another page. The surveyor had drawn a figure, towering, hunched, limbs long and heavy. Its head bowed as though asleep. Or listening. He had annotated it shakily. "If they wake fully, the earth will change shape to fit their memory." My hands shook. "What does that mean?" I whispered. "It means," Mrs. Lowell said softly, "that the Rockies were not formed by nature alone. They were shaped by beings who breathed mountains into existence." I stared at her. "You think they built the mountains?" "I don't think," she whispered. "I've heard them too." My breath caught. "You're a listener?" "Not anymore," she said. "Age weakens the connection. But it never disappears." The room felt smaller, as if the mountains outside leaned closer, listening to every word. I flipped further through the journal. On the final page, ink smudged by rain or tears, the surveyor had written, "They are not human, but they are not our enemies. They dream the world. And some of us dream with them." My pulse raced. When I closed the journal, a faint tremor brushed through the floorboards. A call. A whisper. An invitation. Mrs. Lowell looked at me with both pity and understanding. "They're calling you back," she said softly. "I know." The admission forced itself out of me. But why me? Her expression softened. Because you listened, she repeated. And because you're not the first, but you might be the one they've waited for. A cold wave washed over me. Outside, the mountains seemed to shift in the rising sunlight, shadows stretching like waking limbs. I wasn't done with them. And they weren't done with me. The mountains changed their mood as we moved deeper into the corridor, as if every step pulled us further from the world above. The air thickened, not in a suffocating way, but with an ancient calmness that almost felt like walking into a memory instead of a place. Echoes followed us, but they weren't echoes of our footsteps. They were softer, delayed, warmer, like the cave itself exhaled after each sound we made. Myra's torch beam flickered against the stone walls, revealing spirals and symbols that grew more intricate the farther we went. They began simple, just circles and lines, then slowly expanded into whole stories carved in a language no one alive could read. And yet, it felt readable. Not through words, but through a sensation. A knowing. As if someone had once carved them not to be interpreted by the mind, but to be felt by the heart. I began noticing how the symbols glowed, very faintly, whenever we passed by them. They weren't lit from within. They responded to us. Our warmth, our movement, our presence. Do you see that? I whispered. Mira didn't answer. She simply nodded, eyes fixed on the wall as if she feared looking away would break whatever spell we had just stepped into. The deeper we moved, the more the faint glow grew into something alive, soft pulses of light, slow and rhythmic, like breathing. It didn't illuminate the path, but it guided us. If the lights dimmed, we naturally shifted away. If they brightened, we followed. It was less like walking down a hallway and more like being led. As if the mountain itself reached out, gently taking our hands. The air warmed. The floor smoothed. The sense of forward direction fell away, replaced by a strange drifting feeling, like time had become a soft river we were simply floating inside. The world above, the cold air, the snow, the cabin, felt like something I had dreamed about long ago and only half remembered. I didn't notice when the walls stopped looking like natural stone and began to resemble carved surfaces, precise and impossibly smooth. I didn't notice when the ceiling arched high enough that our lights couldn't even reach it. But I felt it. A shift. A threshold unseen. It began with a hum, too low to be sound, too steady to be vibration. It tingled at the base of my spine and rose to the back of my skull like someone tracing a finger slowly up my bones. Mira froze. The hum grew, but not loud, just present, as if announcing something. Then the corridor widened, and widened, and kept widening until we stepped out into a chamber so vast that my torch beam vanished into nothingness long before reaching any walls. The ceiling felt infinite. The floor was smooth and faintly reflective, like polished obsidian warmed by a hidden sun. Mira breathed out slowly, barely a sound. This can't be natural. It wasn't fear in her voice. It was recognition, kind of reverence. I noticed patterns along the floor, geometric lines like faint trails of gold under the surface, flowing in curves and spirals that seemed to shift when you looked away. They didn't glow outright. They shimmered, like reflections of stars rippling on a black lake. Then I saw it, at the very center of the chamber. A shape. Not bright. Not glowing. Not calling attention. It rested quietly as though it had been waiting a very, very long time. The shape of a door. Not built into the wall, standing alone, unsupported, like an arch cut from a single piece of dark stone. Taller than any human. Wider than any doorway should need to be. But the strangest thing wasn't its size. It was the fact that the inside was completely black. Not shadow black. Not nighttime black. A blackness that swallowed thought. A blackness that felt like falling. A blackness that felt awake. Mira stepped toward it without hesitation. I reached out, catching her shoulder. She didn't flinch, didn't turn. Her voice was soft. I've seen this in my dreams. The hum pulsed once, deep and resonant, like a heartbeat finally syncing with our own. Then the blackness moved, no, not moved, shifted. Not forward or backward, but inward, like an entire universe pulling away, making room. Myra's voice trembled. They called it the threshold of returning. Who? I asked. Her eyes reflected the archway's impossible dark. The ones who built all of this. She stepped closer, hand brushing the air just before the arch. The black surface rippled like liquid touched by a breeze. So, silent, beckoning. And then, I felt it. Not a sensation on my skin, not a sound in my ears, not a whisper in the air. A memory. A memory that wasn't mine. A city beneath the mountains. Lights like stars drifting through stone corridors. Towers carved from crystal and basalt intertwined like frozen lightning. People, not exactly human, not exactly mythical, moving gracefully through streets humming with energy. A civilization that lived in harmony with the earth, listening to its rhythms, sleeping when the planet slept, waking when it awakened. A civilization that had chosen to sleep, chosen to wait, chosen to return when the world above was ready to remember them. Mira stumbled, gasping as if the vision had entered her lungs. I caught her as she fell to one knee, trembling. "They're waking up," she whispered. Her fingers dug into the smooth floor. "They're waking up because we came here." I looked back at the archway. The black surface breathed, slow, gentle, like the chest of a sleeping giant rising and falling. For the first time, I felt no fear. Only invitation. Only inevitability. The hum grew warmer. The symbols on the walls brightened faintly, like distant stars flickering awake after a long winter. And then something happened I will never forget. A shape appeared inside the blackness. Not stepping out. Not approaching. Not forming. Revealing. Like someone standing behind a dim curtain, their outline becoming clear from within the shadow. Not tall. Not monstrous. Not alien. Human. Or almost human. The figure didn't move toward us. It simply lifted its head, slowly, gently, like someone stirring from the deepest sleep imaginable. Mira grabbed my arm. "That's not a warning," she breathed. "That's a greeting." The hum resonated again, deeper than before. Welcoming. Expectant. The blackness shimmered like ink stirred by an unseen hand. And for the first time, I understood exactly what this place was. Not a tomb. Not ruins. Not a forgotten chamber. A waiting room. A cradle of something ancient. A doorway for something returning. Mira lifted her torch higher as the figure inside the shadow leaned forward just enough for the edges of its face to catch the faint light. It wasn't frightening. It wasn't smiling. It wasn't angry. It simply looked relieved, as though its long wait was finally over. I didn't breathe. Couldn't breathe. The chamber felt charged, like the moment before a storm breaks, not dangerous, but necessary. The figure raised its hand. Not a threat. Not a command. A gesture of recognition. And then, a soft whisper filled the chamber. No direction. No source. No voice. Just meaning. "You found us." Myra's grip tightened. She swallowed hard. "What do we do?" My answer rose on instinct, from something deep within me that had been asleep just like the thing behind the arch. We stepped through. The shadow deepened. The hum steadied. The mountains exhaled. The threshold waited. And we stepped closer. We didn't step through immediately. Not because of fear, but because stepping closer to the arch felt like wading toward the edge of a dream you weren't sure you were ready to finish. The blackness rippled again, softer this time, like a curtain touched by a breeze that didn't exist. Mira stood beside me, her breathing slow, controlled, but her eyes glassy with the weight of everything she was seeing. The figure within the shadow didn't move any closer. It was patient, still, as if it knew that rushing us might break something fragile, might snap whatever tiny thread connected our world with theirs. "Do you feel that?" Mira whispered. I nodded. It wasn't fear. It was welcome. A warmth that pulsed from the arch like a silent heartbeat. Each pulse matched my own, matched the chamber's hum, matched everything around us until it all felt like one slow inhalation preparing for something monumental. I raised my hand, stopping just inches from the black surface. Heat radiated from it, but not burning heat, more like the warmth of living skin. The surface quivered. Mira inhaled sharply. "It's aware of you." The idea should have terrified me. Instead, it grounded me, because the warmth felt familiar. Not in a way I could explain, but in the way a scent from childhood hits you without warning, and suddenly a place you thought you had forgotten comes rushing back in full color. I pulled my hand back, not out of fear, but out of awe. The figure in the shadow shifted again, tilting its head, and for the first time, I caught a glimpse of its eyes. They glowed faintly, not with light, but with depth, like two windows looking into an entire sky. And in that instant, I understood something without knowing how I understood it. This was not a guardian, not a sentry, not a threat. It was a guide, a greeter, the first face of a civilization that had waited ages to open its eyes again. Mira took another step forward, her expression torn between wonder and trembling disbelief. "Why us?" she whispered. It was the question that had been circling my mind like a quiet storm. Why would a forgotten civilization wait for two strangers wandering through the Rockies? Why open the threshold now? Why respond to our presence? The answer came, not as words, but as a wave of meaning from the arch, settling over us like a warm fog. "Because you listened." Mira shivered. "Listen to what?" And the answer echoed, wordless but clear. "The earth." The chamber brightened slightly, the shimmering gold patterns beneath the floor swirling slowly beneath our feet. The air thickened with a sense of movement, as if the space around us adjusted its posture, paying attention. I felt dizzy. No, not dizzy. Untethered. Like gravity had loosened its grip on us. Mira stumbled and I caught her arm. "It's okay," I murmured, though I didn't know if that was true. Then the arch shifted. Not physically, its shape remained still and silent, but something inside changed, like an unseen veil lifting. The black surface deepened, becoming impossibly vast. The figure faded slightly, stepping back or simply letting the darkness swallow it again. And then, light bloomed behind the blackness. Not bright, not blinding, more like the glow of dawn still hidden behind a horizon. It pulsed slowly, breathing with the chamber. Mira gasped. "It's opening." The hum rose, not loud, not painful, just steady, wrapping around us like a deep vibration through the bones. Something in my chest responded to it instinctively, like a tuning fork matching pitch. The glow inside the arch slowly expanded, pushing the darkness aside, carving thin streaks of light that wove like liquid gold through the black. Then the streaks formed shapes, structures, silhouettes, a distant skyline. Not human, not alien, something in between. Towers carved into what looked like stone and crystal. Bridges suspended in midair by forces unseen. Pathways curving like waves frozen in motion. A city. A living city. A city breathing. Mira stepped closer until she was only inches. From the arch, "It's beautiful." I couldn't speak. The city behind the threshold felt ancient, but not dead. Dreaming. Waiting. The hum shifted into something like a whisper, gentle, countless voices speaking at once without sound. Myra's fingers brushed the surface of the arch. There was no resistance. No barrier. Her hand slipped through as if touching water. The surface rippled around her wrist. She gasped but didn't pull away. "It's warm." "Does it hurt?" I asked. She shook her head, eyes wide with wonder. "No. It feels like being welcomed home." I took a breath that trembled and lifted my hand again. When my fingers touched the black surface, there was no shock, no sting, no resistance. Only warmth. A warmth that wrapped around my hand like soft cloth. I pushed forward, the blackness parting silently around my skin. It didn't feel like crossing a border. It felt like entering a memory. The moment my entire hand slipped through, the chamber around us dimmed, not darker, but quieter, like every stone listened intently. The arch flared, gently, lovingly, like a lantern being lifted in the dark. Mira turned to me, her voice barely a whisper. "We have to go." I nodded. There was no world in which we turned back now. Not after this. And yet, just before we stepped through, something shifted behind us. A soft scrape of stone. A whisper of movement in the chamber's vast emptiness. Mira froze. "Did you hear?" The sound came again. Not threatening. Not hiding. Curious. As if something else in the chamber had awakened too. Slowly, cautiously we turned. And in the far corner of the enormous space, just barely visible in the dim light, another figure stood. Not like the one in the arch. Not made of shadow. Solid. Human-shaped. Still. Watching. For a long moment, none of us moved. Myra's voice cracked. "Is that..." The figure stepped forward. Just one step. Enough to make my heart slam against my ribs. Enough to reveal the faint glint of something metallic around its arms. Enough to show that it was not a shadow. Not a vision. Not part of the ancient civilization. It was someone else entirely. Someone who had been here long before we arrived. Someone who had been waiting too. "We're not alone," I whispered. The arch behind us pulsed urgently, as if warning us, or urging us to hurry. And the chamber hum deepened, vibrating the floor beneath our feet. Mira grabbed my hand. "We need to move. Now." The figure stepped closer. The arch flared brighter. The threshold widened. And with one final breath, one final glance at the unknown watcher approaching through the dark, we stepped through. Crossing the threshold felt nothing like stepping through a doorway. It felt like falling upward. The moment the arch swallowed us, warmth flooded through my entire body. Not heat, not energy, but something gentler. Like sinking into a warm lake at night, the water and darkness holding you softly, guiding you rather than pulling you. Myra's hand tightened around mine. For a moment, there was nothing. No up, no down, no sound, no ground beneath our feet. We didn't move. We drifted. Weightless. Timeless. Wrapped in something that felt alive and aware. A voice, wordless, distant, familiar, whispered through the dark between worlds. "Do not fear. This is remembering." Light blossomed slowly, unfolding like petals of dawn around us. The darkness thinned into soft gold, and then into shapes, vague at first, then clear enough to breathe. My feet touched solid ground. Mira gasped beside me as the world steadied and solidified around us. We stood in a vast hall carved from stone that glowed from within, veins of soft amber light threading through the walls like living roots. The air was warm, gently humming, alive with faint vibrations that tickled the skin. Everything felt both old and impossibly new. Mira whispered, "We're inside." Not inside the mountain, inside the civilization. We turned in place slowly, trying to take in every detail. The hall stretched endlessly in both directions, supported by massive columns carved with spirals that flowed seamlessly into one another like frozen air currents. Between the columns were archways filled with a soft mist that moved as though breathing. Far above us, the ceiling shimmered with patterns like a night sky, stars shifting, drifting as if aware of our presence. It was a world carved from silence and memory. "This doesn't feel abandoned," I murmured. Mira nodded slowly. "Because it isn't." Just as she said it, something moved. Not beside us. Not above. Beneath. The floor pulsed softly, once, then again, like the heartbeat of something enormous buried under our feet. A welcome, not a warning. Then, from behind one of the stone columns, a figure stepped into view. Mira stiffened, but this figure was nothing like the one in the chamber behind us. This one was luminous. Softly, faintly, like light filtered through water. Its form was human in outline but fluid, its edges shimmering with a pale blue glow. It stood still for a moment, as if giving us time to adjust to its presence. Then it raised a single hand in that same gentle gesture we had seen inside the arch recognition. "Greeting." Mira breathed out, her voice trembling. Are you real?" The figure tilted its head slightly, then stepped closer. Its feet made no sound on the ground, but with each step it took, the amber veins in the stone brightened, responding to its presence. I didn't feel fear. I felt an odd sense of safety, as though I had stepped into a story I had once known and forgotten. The figure stopped an arm's length away. Its face was serene, not quite human but unmistakably expressive, eyes like deep pools of still water reflecting a sky I had never seen. Then something remarkable happened. The figure spoke. Not with a voice, not with sound. The words bloomed directly inside my mind, gentle as drifting feathers. "Welcome home." Myra's breath caught. "Home!" Her confusion echoed mine. The figure's expression softened. It lifted a hand toward the air, and the space around us shimmered. Images unfolded like waking dreams. Not images of the present. Memories. A sprawling city carved beneath the Rockies. Towers grown from the stone itself, bending like trees toward a ceiling of luminous crystal. People, tall, graceful, eyes glowing faintly, walked through the city with a quiet, peaceful purpose. They worked not with machines, but with the earth. With light. With a power that pulsed through the stone like living energy. A civilization older than the idea of America, older than the first footprints on the continent. A civilization that had thrived in silence and harmony, never seeking to conquer or expand above ground. A civilization that slept when the world above turned violent. That sealed itself away to wait out centuries of chaos. A civilization that left only whispers behind, whispers mistaken for legend. The vision faded slowly, leaving the hall quiet again. I swallowed. Why show us this? The figure's answer came like a warm breeze. Because you remembered us. Mira shook her head. We didn't even know you existed. The figure stepped closer. The air around it hummed softly, comforting. Not with your minds, with your hearts. It gestured toward us, toward our chests, our breath, our trembling hands. You listened. You followed the pull. And the earth brought you here. Myra's voice cracked. There was someone else with us. In that chamber. Watching. The figure's peaceful expression dimmed slightly, like light passing behind a cloud. Mira swallowed. Who was it? The figure didn't answer immediately. Instead, it turned and began walking deeper into the hall. When it moved, the stone veins beneath it glowed brighter, lighting a path that hadn't existed moments before. Without looking back, it sent one clear message into our minds. Come. There is much you must understand. We followed, our footsteps echoing softly in the vast chamber. As we walked, I felt it again. the sensation that we were moving deeper not just into a place, but into a story, one that had been waiting centuries for a new chapter. Mira walked close beside me, her expression tight with worry. "That figure back in the chamber," she whispered. "The one hiding. The one watching." I nodded slowly. "Whoever it was, they didn't come through the threshold." Myra's voice lowered into a shiver. "Or maybe they weren't allowed to." The glowing figure ahead of us paused. Only for a moment, but it was enough to tell us one thing. Whoever followed us into that chamber was not part of the civilization welcoming us now. And whatever waited deeper in this hidden empire, whatever truth they were about to show us, was something that someone else had been searching for long before we ever arrived. The hall narrowed as we followed the glowing figure, the air warming with every step. The amber veins in the walls brightened, flowing like slow rivers of light, guiding us deeper into the heart of the forgotten world. There was a rhythm to the glow, gentle, steady, like the pulse of something ancient that had just begun to stir after a long sleep. Myra's footsteps echoed behind mine, soft but tense. She kept glancing over her shoulder even though the threshold was long gone. It wasn't paranoia. The memory of that other figure, the one hiding in the shadows, hung behind us like a second pair of footsteps we couldn't quite hear. The glowing guide led us through another archway, this one lower and more intricate, carved with patterns that shifted when the light touched them. Spirals unfurled into shapes that resembled wings. Lines curved into eyes that blinked once before fading back into stone. Mira slowed, staring. "These carvings, they're alive." The guide answered without turning. "Everything here is alive. Everything remembers." The floor beneath our feet changed as we stepped through the arch. It was no longer smooth stone. It felt softer, like polished earth, warm and slightly springy. The hallway opened into a wide, circular room bathed in a pale blue luminescence. In the center stood a pool, not water, not liquid, but a shimmering substance that looked like light suspended in motion. It rippled without sound, without waves, glowing brighter whenever we breathed. Mira whispered, "What is that?" The guide finally stopped. Its glowing form reflected softly in the surface of the pool. "Memory." I frowned. "A memory pool?" "No," the guide corrected gently. "Memory itself." Mira stepped closer, captivated. "Like a record?" "A living one." The guide gestured toward the swirling light. "The earth remembers everything that has touched it. Every life. Every choice. Every moment. We learn to listen to it. To store our history within it. Safely. Silently." Myra's eyes widened. "That means all of your civilization, your entire story, is here?" The guide nodded once. "Everything the world above forgets, the earth keeps." That sentence settled into my bones with a weight I couldn't explain. The idea that history could sleep, that civilizations could hide not by vanishing, but by sinking into the silence of the world itself. It changed something in me. The guide stepped aside, revealing a small platform beside the glowing pool. "Come. You must see what hunts you." A chill ran through me, though the air remained warm. Mira stiffened. "Hunts us." The guide's light dimmed, as if saddened. "The one who followed you into the chamber. He is not one of us. He is one of yours." "Ours," I repeated. The guide moved closer to the pool, its reflections scattering like broken stars across the surface. "He is from the world above. But he has been here much longer than he should have been." Mira tilted her head. "What does that mean?" The guide lifted its hand and the pool flared, soft, then bright, then impossibly clear. Images swirled into focus. A man standing alone on a rocky ridge high above the snowline, wrapped in heavy gear, face hidden behind goggles and frost. His posture was rigid, focused, as if he waited for something specific. The scene shifted. The man walked through the mountains with confidence, not searching randomly, but following a path only he could see. The image zoomed in. His eyes, icy blue, sharp, relentless, watched the landscape like a predator studying prey. Mira breathed in sharply. He knew about the entrance. He has known for years. The guide's voice resonated through the chamber like a soft pulse. The pool shifted again. The man stood in front of the very same hidden entrance Mira had discovered. But this was long before we arrived. He touched the stone with a kind of hunger, tracing the carving with trembling fingers. He whispered something, but the memory offered no sound. Only intent. Obsession. The image dissolved. The man appeared again, this time. Inside the first chamber, the giant hall Mira and I had nearly collapsed inside. He wasn't in awe like we were. He was surveying it, studying its structure, searching. Mira whispered, "How did he get in if the threshold wasn't open?" The guide dimmed. He forced his way through. The pool rippled violently, showing a flash of light, too bright, too quick to understand. Then the man fell backward, thrown by some unseen force. The next image showed him crawling, injured but alive, leaving the chamber through a different tunnel than the one we used. My stomach twisted. So he survived. But he was changed. The next vision struck me like a blow. The man stood before a group of people above ground. Scientists, officials, men in uniforms. He spoke to them with intensity, but they looked confused, dismissive. He slammed a hand on a table, furious. They did not believe him. The guide's voice softened. They called him delusional. Mira whispered, "So he came back alone." The pool shifted again. The man sat alone in a small cabin, deep in the mountains, surrounded by maps, diagrams, strange markings drawn in obsessive loops. His eyes were hollow, tormented, determined. The last image showed him staring into the fire, whispering to himself. The pool darkened. He searched for years. He waited. And when you opened the entrance, he felt it. Mira stepped back, trembling. So he followed us. Why? The guide's light dimmed into a somber hue. Because he believes this place belongs to him. He believes he was chosen, not you. And he will not allow anyone else to claim what he thinks he lost. My chest tightened. The guide wasn't finished. Its voice lowered, deep as an echo from the earth itself. And now that you have crossed the threshold, he will do whatever he must to follow. Mira shook her head. But he didn't come through the arch. The guide turned to her slowly, its eyes glowing with ancient, sorrowful knowledge. He doesn't need the arch anymore. A cold realization slid down my spine. Mira whispered the question for both of us. Why not? The guide answered with a single, chilling message. Because something else has been awakening inside him. The pool's surface trembled. The lights dimmed. And the earth, far beneath our feet, shuddered like something enormous turning in its sleep. Mira reached for my arm, her voice quivering. What is happening to him? The guide took one slow step toward us. He is not just following you. Its next words landed like a stone in the dark. He is becoming something he was never meant to be. And for the first time since entering the lost civilization, Mira and I felt fear, not of the ancient world surrounding us, but of the man climbing ever closer behind it. The tremor beneath our feet continued, subtle at first, then stronger, like a warning whispered from the heart of the mountain. Mira clutched my arm tightly. "Do you feel that?" she asked, voice trembling. I nodded. It wasn't an earthquake. Not exactly. It was the pulse of something alive, enormous, and aware. The guide's glow dimmed, and its form shimmered, as if acknowledging the shifting rhythm of the earth. He is moving closer, it whispered in our minds. You must understand what he has become. I swallowed hard. The words were not comforting. What is he becoming? I asked aloud. Something that the mountain will remember, the guide said. Something that will echo through time if he is allowed to continue. Myra's eyes were wide, reflecting the soft luminescence of the chamber. We have to stop him, she whispered. The guide shook its head slowly. He is beyond stopping now. Only understanding may slow him. Only knowledge may contain him, if you are clever enough to survive what he becomes. The floor vibrated beneath us again, stronger this time. I felt the echoes move up my legs, through my chest, resonating with my heartbeat. My skin prickled, hair standing on end. Something was waking, not above us, not beside us, but from beneath. From the memory pool. The guide moved closer to the pool, gesturing toward the swirling lights. The memories will show you what he was, what he seeks, and what he fears. I stepped forward cautiously, my gaze drawn to the surface of the shimmering substance. The images began to flow, blurred at first, then sharp. I saw the man alone in the cabin again, staring at the mountains. I saw the tunnels he dug, the carvings he replicated, the threshold he traced with obsessive hands. He wasn't just following us. He was trying to claim what the mountain itself had preserved. The visions shifted. Now, I saw him inside the chamber where we had first found the slab, the archway that led here. Only this time, he was different. His body twisted unnaturally. His eyes glowed faintly, the same icy blue from the earlier vision, but now burning with something more. Hunger? Obsession? The guide's voice trembled slightly. He has touched the echoes of the sleepers too closely. He has absorbed their memory without harmony. He is becoming part shadow, part hunger. A reflection of what he desires but cannot sustain. Mira gasped. So, he's being changed by the sleepers? Not by them, the guide corrected. By himself. By his refusal to listen. By his insistence on claiming what is not his. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. Then he's dangerous. The guide nodded. More than dangerous. He is becoming a bridge between your world and ours. A bridge forged by obsession. And you, who have listened, who have entered the threshold with respect, may be the only ones capable of confronting him without being consumed. Mira shook her head, taking a step back. Confront him? We don't even know what he is now. You will see soon enough, the guide whispered. The pool's surface rippled violently. Visions flashed faster now, like pages being torn from a book too quickly. The man's form in the cabin, his obsession, the ancient carvings, the tunnels, the threshold, the pulse, the hum, the mountain itself, all compressed into a dizzying montage. I stumbled, holding on to Mira. She pressed her forehead to mine. This is insane, she breathed. I swallowed. Insidious. But real. The guide extended its hand, and the pool's surface calmed slightly. If you wish to survive what comes, you must learn the balance. Mira frowned. Balance. The guide's glow pulsed softly, illuminating its face. The mountain breathes. It remembers. It sleeps. The sleepers wait. You have entered the rhythm. He has tried to force it. You must move with it, not against it. I nodded slowly, understanding at a deep level what the guide meant. We move with it, I whispered. We listen. Mira tightened her grip on my hand. And what if he's already too far gone? Then the guide said you must find that part of him that remembers being human. The part that fears forgetting. Only that fragment can guide him back, or contain what he has become. The chamber trembled again. Not violently, but like a heartbeat quickening. The mountain's pulse had changed. The air vibrated with tension, anticipation. Something was coming. The man. The figure who had followed us. I swallowed, feeling the rising dread alongside a strange sense of inevitability. We were part of a story far older than our lives, A story of mountains, sleepers, and humans who stumbled into a civilization that had been waiting for centuries. The guide's glow intensified. He is near. And then, from the direction of the threshold we had crossed, a sound echoed, low, resonant, and horrifyingly familiar. Not the hum of the chamber. Not the gentle pulse of the mountain. A deep, distorted voice, almost like the mountain itself groaning, calling. Mira clutched my arm. "That's him," she whispered. I nodded, breath tight in my chest. The guide's form pulsed with a warmth that wrapped around us. "Do not fear him. Listen. Understand. Do not resist the rhythm." The ground beneath us shivered again. And from the darkness beyond the chamber, the man emerged, his form twisting unnaturally, a living shadow fueled by obsession and the mountain's memory. He stopped at the entrance, the arch behind him flaring faintly. His eyes burned with ice and hunger, his body a distorted reflection of what he had touched in the memory pool. And then his gaze fell upon us. Recognition, hunger, confusion. A bridge now fully formed between our world and the sleeper's realm. Myra's whisper trembled. "This is impossible." No, the guide said. "Nothing here is impossible. Only waiting." The man's lips moved, but no sound came. The mountain itself hummed, vibrating in resonance with him. And in that moment, I understood, the only way to face him was not with force. Not with weapons. Not with resistance. But with listening. With harmony. With remembering. The pulse of the mountain quickened. The guide extended a hand toward the memory pool. "Use it." Mira and I stepped closer. And the man, twisted and terrifying, began to advance. But for the first time, I felt the connection, the rhythm, the impossible heartbeat of a world waiting to forgive, to remember, to restore. And as we approached the pool, I knew that everything, the threshold, the sleepers, the hidden civilization, the man who had followed us, was about to collide in a single moment that could either awaken or destroy the balance forever. The memory pool shimmered as Mira and I stepped closer. Its light rippled across the chamber, casting shifting reflections on the glowing columns. I felt the pulse of the mountain align with my heartbeat, steady and deep, like the world itself was breathing through me. The man paused at the threshold, his twisted form tense, like a predator frozen mid-strike. His eyes burned, not with anger, but with desperate longing, a hunger that had no name. Myra's hand pressed against mine. "What do we do?" she whispered, voice trembling. "Listen." The guide's thought entered my mind as clearly as if it had spoken aloud. "Do not resist. Do not strike. Do not fear. Only listen." I nodded. Slowly, carefully, I let the memory pool draw me in. The surface undulated, wrapping my senses in visions and echoes. I felt the mountain's ancient pulse, the rhythms of the sleepers, the harmony of stone and light, and then, the man. His pulse. Jagged. Erratic. Torn between the earth and his obsession. I understood. He had touched the memory of the sleepers without understanding their rhythm. He had taken what was never meant for him, and in doing so, he had begun to unravel himself. Myra's eyes widened as she saw my face. "What are you feeling?" I swallowed. "I can feel him. His fear. His confusion. He's not evil. The guide's glow brightened. "Recognize it. Reach it." I extended my hand toward the pool. Mira did the same. Light from the surface rose, streaming in threads toward us. I focused on the man, on the fragments of memory he had stolen, the longing buried deep within him. The pool responded, glowing brighter, its surface shimmering with the rhythm of the earth. Slowly, the man stepped forward. His form twisted and pulsed as he moved, his distorted body reflecting the imbalance within. Yet he didn't attack. His eyes flickered between rage and recognition. Mira whispered, He's listening too. I nodded. He can be reminded, I thought. He can be guided back. The guide moved closer, its glowing hand hovering above the pool. Channel the rhythm. Show him what harmony feels like. I closed my eyes for a moment, listening to the mountain, the chamber, the pool, and the fragment of humanity left in the man. I let the pulse flow through me, let it stream into Mira, and together we extended our awareness toward him. The energy wrapped around him, not as force, but as warmth, as a whisper, as the memory of balance. His body shuddered. His glowing eyes widened, reflecting astonishment. The jagged pulses in him began to smooth. The twisted contours softened. His breathing, uneven and harsh, slowed. He fell to his knees at the entrance, trembling. The distortion faded. For the first time, he looked human. Exhausted, scared, but human. Mira stepped forward, her voice gentle. It's okay. You're safe now. He looked up at us, eyes still glowing faintly, and I sensed a flicker of gratitude, a recognition that he had been seen, heard, and remembered. The guide whispered through the chamber, softer than before. He is returned. For now. But he must choose his own path. The memory pool rippled one last time, shedding golden threads that wrapped around the three of us. Warmth. Harmony. Connection. The mountain exhaled, a gentle shiver moving through the floor beneath us. Mira and I exchanged a glance. Relief. Astonishment. Understanding. The man slowly rose, still trembling. He didn't speak, but his eyes met ours. No threat. No obsession. Only a question. Where do we go from here? I stepped toward him. Back, I said softly. Back to the surface. Back to life above ground. But remember what you've seen. Respect it. And never touch what you don't understand again. The man nodded slowly, comprehension dawning. The guide pulsed one last time, its form shimmering, then began to fade, dissolving into the ambient glow of the chamber. Your journey continues. Its thought lingered, soft and fading. But now you carry the rhythm with you. The chamber grew quieter, the pool settling into a gentle shimmer. The arch behind us remained open, a gateway back to the world above. The man, Mira, and I stepped forward together. With each step, the pulse of the mountain slowed, but never stopped. It would wait, as it always had, as it always would, for the next listener. We emerged from the threshold, stepping onto familiar stone floors, the Rockies stretching above us under the pale morning sun. Snow glistened. Wind whispered through the pines. And yet, everything had changed. Not the mountains themselves, not the forest, not the sky, but us. We carried the memory. We carried the pulse. We carried the rhythm of a civilization that had slept beneath the earth for centuries. And for the first time, I understood what it meant to listen, not just with ears or eyes or mind, but with the heart, with the soul, and with the patience to hear what has always been trying to speak. Mira exhaled, her voice soft but steady. We survived. I shook my head slowly. We didn't just survive. We remembered. The man we had helped stabilize remained silent, watching the mountains. His expression was unreadable but calm. Something in him had shifted. Something vital. And as we turned away from the threshold, leaving the sleeping empire behind, for now, I knew that this story, the story of the civilization beneath the Rockies, would never truly end. Because it slept, waited, and breathed in harmony with the earth. And now we were part of that rhythm too. The snow crunched softly beneath our boots as we moved away from the threshold. The morning light painted the peaks in soft gold, but the memory of the chamber lingered in our minds like a second world we could not escape. Mira walked beside me, still shivering from the experience, though her eyes were wide with wonder. "Do you think it's really over?" she asked. I paused, letting the cold mountain air fill my lungs. I don't think it ever ends, I said. Not really. It's sleeping us, but it waits. Always. The man who had followed us remained quiet behind us, moving carefully, almost cautiously, as if testing the surface world he had forgotten. He had changed. The obsession that had driven him before had softened into something quieter, tentative, almost fragile. Yet I could feel the pulse of the sleepers still inside him, a reminder of the mountain's rhythm that he could not entirely shed. We walked in silence for a while, letting the air and light ground us after the intensity of the chamber. It felt strange. So much weight had been lifted, yet so much remained. The Rockies stretched endlessly around us, familiar yet strange in the context of what we had just seen. I glanced at Mira. Do you understand now? Why it waited so long? Why it had to be us? She shook her head slowly. But only partly. It's more than survival, isn't it? More than just hiding. I nodded. It's memory. Harmony. The mountain preserves it, waits for someone who can carry it without destroying it. Mira exhaled and smiled faintly. I guess that means we're guardians now? Listeners, maybe, I said. The mountain has a rhythm, and now a part of it beats in us too. The man behind us shifted slightly, and for the first time, I felt his presence without tension. He was no longer a threat, just another human being, rediscovering the world after touching something far older than he could have imagined. I have questions, he said finally, his voice low but steady. About them. About the sleepers. About everything. Mira nodded. So do I. But maybe not all at once. We paused at the edge of a ridge, looking down at the forested valley below. The mountain air was crisp, filled with the scent of pine and snow. I felt a strange calm, as though the pulse of the sleepers had seeped into the landscape itself. The guide's words echoed in my mind. You carry the rhythm now. Do you think others like us exist? Mira asked quietly. Other people the mountain has chosen? I shrugged. Maybe. Or maybe it just waits until the right time. Until the right people find it again. The man spoke again. What about him? The one I became, the shadow I was. I turned to him. You've been given a second chance. But it's fragile. The mountain remembers, yes, but it also warns. If you forget the rhythm, if you let obsession guide you again, it will reclaim you. Slowly, quietly, until you are lost. He nodded solemnly, absorbing the weight of that. I understand, he said. I won't forget. Mira smiled faintly. Good. Because if you do, it won't just be your loss. It will echo. We began walking down the slope, following the forest path that led away from the threshold, away from the hidden empire beneath the Rockies. Each step felt heavier and lighter at the same time, heavier with the knowledge of what we had witnessed, lighter with the sense that we had survived it intact. The mountain around us felt alive. Not in a supernatural way, but in the way that the earth feels alive to those who pay attention. Wind rustling the pines, snow glittering in the sun, stone beneath boots resonating with an ancient heartbeat. The man stayed silent beside us, his eyes tracing the slopes and ridges as if seeing the land for the first time. Mira spoke softly. Do you think anyone above ground would believe us? I smiled faintly. Maybe not. But it doesn't matter. This isn't for them. It's for the mountain, for the sleepers, for us. The pulse of the mountain lingered in my chest, slow and steady, guiding our steps. We walked on, leaving the ridge behind, carrying the rhythm with us. And I knew, without needing to see, that beneath the Rockies, the sleeping empire still waited, patient, aware, and timeless. We had touched it, listened, and survived. But the story wasn't over. It had merely entered a new rhythm, one that now included us. And as we descended toward the world above, I felt the mountain's heartbeat echoing within me, steady and eternal, a reminder that some civilizations never truly vanish, they sleep. And sometimes, if the world is patient enough, they wake. The forest around us grew denser as we descended, the sunlight filtering through the pines in thin, golden ribbons. Each step felt deliberate, like walking through a memory, not just the physical world. Mira stayed close, still trembling from the intensity of what we had experienced, but her eyes carried a spark of awe I hadn't seen before. The man who had followed us moved quietly, observing the trees, the ridges, the snow-capped peaks, as though cataloging every detail for some inner reckoning. "Do you think it will stay hidden?" Mira asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I glanced at her, the weight of the sleeper's world pressing gently against my mind. It doesn't stay hidden because it wants to. It stays hidden because the world above isn't ready to hear, to understand, to carry the rhythm without breaking it. She nodded slowly. And us? Are we ready? I let the question hang for a moment. We've been chosen by circumstance, by curiosity, by listening. That's all the readiness anyone can have. The man shifted beside us, his breath visible in the cold mountain air. "And what about him?" Mira asked, her gaze flicking to where the threshold had disappeared, concealed beneath the folds of stone. "The one who nearly became a shadow?" I swallowed hard. He's part of this story now, whether he knows it or not. His obsession taught him, in its own harsh way, that some things cannot be taken. They must be understood, respected. And maybe, just maybe he learned that. Mira exhaled slowly, relief and lingering tension mixing in her expression. "I hope so," she murmured. The trail curved sharply downward, revealing a small clearing where the snow had melted, leaving patches of dark earth and pine needles. I stopped and looked around, feeling the pulse of the mountains subtly shift beneath us. It was calmer here, tempered by distance, but still alive. The guide's words echoed softly in my mind. "Carry the rhythm. Remember what you have seen. Walk gently in both worlds." Mira leaned against a tree, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "Do you ever think about how many people have stumbled onto something like this, and failed to survive it?" I nodded. "All the time. That's why it chose us. Not because we were brave, or clever, or strong, but because we listened, because we followed without breaking the rhythm." A breeze stirred, carrying the scent of snow and pine, and for the first time in hours, I felt grounded. The pulse inside me, the rhythm of the sleepers, remained. Not as a threat, not as a weight, but as a quiet companion. The man finally spoke, his voice low and steady. I saw it, the memory pool, the sleepers, everything. I felt the pulse. I'm not sure I can ever forget it. Mira smiled faintly. That's the point. You don't forget. You carry it. Like we do. Like the mountain does. He nodded, gazing toward the distant peaks. It's beautiful, terrifying, and alive. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Just alive. And waiting. Always waiting. But now, we know it's not gone. Not ever. Myra's eyes met mine. "Do you think we'll come back?" I considered this. The sleepers were patient, timeless. Their rhythm was steady, eternal. I think, if the mountain calls us again, we will. But only when we are ready to listen further. To follow deeper. The man took a step forward, crunching leaves beneath his boots. "And if someone else finds it? Someone less careful?" I shook my head slowly. "Then the mountain will protect itself." Boys. The sleepers chose to hide, to wait, to teach only those who are ready. It's more patient than anyone alive. We continued our descent in silence, letting the forest and the light fill the space between us. The mountain air carried a gentle hum, almost imperceptible, as if the world itself exhaled in approval. For the first time, I felt a strange peace, not the exhilaration of discovery, nor the fear of what we had faced, but a quiet understanding that we were part of something bigger, something older than us, something that would outlast all of us. Myra's voice broke the silence again. Do you think we'll ever explain this to anyone? I smiled faintly. Maybe. Or maybe some things aren't meant for telling. They're meant for living, for carrying forward quietly. The man remained silent, but I could sense his agreement. He had glimpsed eternity and survived, but he knew the weight of that knowledge. As the trees thinned and we neared a familiar trail that would lead back toward the cabin, I realized that the world above ground would continue in ignorance, unaware of the empire beneath the Rockies. Yet we carried it, a rhythm embedded in our hearts, echoing softly with every breath. And as we stepped onto the familiar path, the sun breaking over the horizon, I knew one truth: the sleepers would wait. The mountain would endure. And we, listeners, witnesses, carriers, would remember, quietly, patiently, forever. The trail leveled out as we approached the lower slopes, where the forest opened into a wide valley bathed in golden sunlight. Snow patches sparkled in the morning light, and the air was crisp with the scent of pine and earth. For the first time since entering the hidden world beneath the Rockies, I felt the weight of our journey begin to settle. Not like relief, but like a quiet understanding that something vast had shifted within us. Mira walked beside me, her steps slow, thoughtful, her eyes tracing the ridges that hid the threshold from the world above. "Do you think anyone would ever believe us?" she asked quietly. I shook my head, smiling faintly. "No one needs to. Not now. Not ever. Some things aren't meant for telling. They're meant for carrying." The man who had followed us stayed slightly behind, silent, reflective. I could see the memory of the sleeper's world in his gaze, the pulse of the mountain, the rhythm of the hidden civilization, the delicate balance between curiosity and reverence. He had changed. Not entirely healed, not entirely human again, but tempered. The obsession that had once consumed him had been replaced, at least for now, with understanding. We continued down the valley, the path opening into familiar territory. The cabin, the frozen creek, the dense pines stretching toward the sky. Each step felt lighter than before, not because the journey was over, but because the knowledge we carried had weight, yes, but it was steady, like a heartbeat in tune with the world. Mira paused, looking back toward the mountains. "Do you think it's still there? The civilization?" I followed her gaze. The peaks were silent, the forest still, the threshold hidden. "It's sleeping," I said. "Always waiting, always patient, for the right listeners, for the right hearts, for those who can carry its rhythm without breaking it." A quiet calm settled over us, as if the mountain itself acknowledged our passage. The man spoke for the first time in hours. "I don't know if I'll ever stop thinking about it. About the pool, the sleepers, the rhythm." Mira nodded. "You don't have to stop. You just have to remember to listen. Not to take. Not to force. Just to carry it with you." The sun climbed higher, illuminating the valley and the distant peaks. We reached the small clearing near the cabin, the world above ground stretching into familiar territory, unchanged yet profoundly different through the lens of what we had experienced. I breathed deeply. The mountain's pulse, faint but steady, lingered within me. The rhythm of the sleepers was now part of our heartbeat. Mira reached for my hand. "We survived," she whispered, eyes glistening with emotion. I shook my head, smiling gently. "We didn't just survive. We remembered. And that's why it matters." The man stayed silent, but I could feel the echo of the mountain in his posture, a subtle shift from obsession to understanding, from hunger to awareness. The Rockies rose behind us, silent sentinels guarding a secret that had waited centuries. The civilization beneath their slopes remained hidden, patient, eternal. And we had been chosen, if only briefly, to witness it, to carry its memory, to follow its rhythm. As we stepped forward onto the snow-lined path that led back to the world of humans, the sunlight warmed our faces, but it could not outshine the knowledge we carried, quietly, deeply, forever. For some civilizations never truly vanish. They sleep. They wait. They breathe in harmony with the world until someone listens. And now, part of that pulse, part of that rhythm, lived in us. We would never forget. We would never ignore it. The sleeping empire beneath the Rockies would endure, eternal and unseen, and its story, once forgotten, had found its way into hearts that could finally hear. And in that quiet understanding, I knew one final truth. The world above could continue in ignorance, but we would walk forward, changed, listening, remembering, carrying the rhythm of a civilization that had waited centuries for us to wake. As the sun rises over the Rockies, we step back into the world above, carrying the secrets of a civilization that has slept for centuries. The sleeping empire beneath the mountains remains hidden, patient, and eternal, but its pulse now beats quietly within us. Every step we take is guided by the rhythm of the earth, by the memory of those who waited in silence. If you've ever wondered what lies forgotten beneath our feet, this is the story that reminds us. Some histories never truly vanish. They sleep, and sometimes, if you listen carefully, they awaken. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the hidden world beneath the Rockies. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss a deep dive into the mysteries of our forgotten past. Stay curious, and remember, the world has more secrets than we can imagine, waiting for those brave enough to discover them.